Okay, so I'll just introduce myself first and then I'll pass over to my colleagues as well to introduce themselves. My name is Rachel Heaver-Webb. I'm one of the assistant head teachers and I have responsibility for assessment and examinations, but we don't need to think about that too much at the moment for Year 7. So I'm just going to pass you over to Mrs. Warnell first to introduce herself and then Mr. Massimino to start the meeting.
Good evening, everybody. Great to see so many of you here this evening. So I am Louise Warnell, assistant head in school, responsible for teaching and learning. I'll talk to you a little bit about remote learning and curriculum maps and homework this evening.
And good evening, everyone. My name is Mario Massimino and I am head of Year 7. And my job is to welcome you this evening and talk a little bit about my experience over the last 10 days. It has been amazing to welcome students to Ringwood School as part of Team Ringwood. We started our week last Monday with some induction days, and I'll talk on that very shortly.
Okay, if I can just share the PowerPoint. And then we can get started. Of course, we say that. And the first thing that happens is the PowerPoint doesn't appear to want to be shared. Just give me 1 second to do that. And then we will get started. And we should have said already that tomorrow you will get a link to this meeting, along with a little bit more information on the English and the maths curriculum that we just feel would be a bit squeezed if we put it in tonight as well. So we're going to send that information around tomorrow, along with a link to this meeting. So just in case you can't see it all, oh dear, it's really not wanting me to share the PowerPoint at the moment, so just excuse me for a second while we see if we can sort that out.
I can talk, Miss, while you have a fiddle with that if you like. I don't need any of my slides, so I'll come back to you the last. Oh, there we go.
Ah, okay. Oh no, we're not showing the right thing. Let me just, there we go. Can we see the PowerPoint? I'm really hoping that we can, Mr. Massimino.
I can see the PowerPoint, yes.
Brilliant. Okay, I'll just hopefully in 1 second get it started.
It wouldn't be a Zoom meeting without technical hiccups, or my son in the background kicking off because he can't use the internet. So I hope you're all really well. Yeah, I talked about starting my time last week, welcoming them onto school site in their school uniform with their house ties, nervous but excited. And I have been so impressed and proud with how well they have done in the last few days. So we had our induction day, we had our day of It's a Knockout, throwing water over each other, building those teamwork skills and getting them to know what we kind of encompass in Team Ringwood. And we said when they started, the 3 things I wanted them to do was get involved, be kind and try their best at all times. And I've already seen that from a number of them in their interactions at break and lunch, introducing themselves to new people, their interactions in tutor time, those actions they've been doing in the clubs with the Get Involved. I've seen loads of Year 7s at clubs this week, be it hockey club this evening, rugby earlier in the week, loads of girls and boys out of football earlier last week. So they are doing that and they are always trying their best so far. It's what I've seen and what I've been really, really impressed with. So many teachers have been emailing me going, oh my goodness, Year 7 are absolutely adorable, really lovely. We talked in assembly about being kind to staff as well as to each other and saying thank you on the way out of a lesson you've particularly enjoyed. And I've just had so much wonderful feedback. So well done to all of you for your cajoling and your support and your geeing them up and getting them ready each day. And well done to all of the Year 7s. If any of you are sat there, I'm really, really impressed with you. Even on my behaviour walk today, period 6, sticking my head in, lots of keen Year 7s, working hard, getting on with things. And it's been a real pleasure. And that they're starting to learn their way. There's fewer Year 7s wandering around school with their diary and their map out, finding their way, but they are getting there. And yeah, well done to all of them. And the message to those of them that might be sitting there thinking, I'm not really there yet, that's absolutely fine. I know for some of you it has taken a little bit longer, and for some of those students they maybe aren't as confident as others, but just communicate with me and let me know. They're having a wobble, they're tired towards the back end of the week, they're worried about, they've forgotten their tie. Just tell us and we can help them. There's very few things in school that I can't help fix alongside the tutor team. And I also want to thank those of you for the way in which you've communicated with me. It can be a stressful time, it can be a worrying time, but every single one of you has been polite, you've been lovely in the tone of your emails. When you've spoken to me on the phone, you've been, I understand you're really busy, and that makes what is a busy job a lot easier by you guys understanding that it's a relationship. So thank you for you as well for joining us as part of Team Ringwood, and long may all that wonderful stuff continue. Our September precept is about continuous effort, allowing us to reach our potential, and we will reward students of the month at the end of September who just try their best. So please push those messages to your children, get them to come to lots of clubs, and I look forward to seeing how they develop over the next coming year. So on to what we're going to talk to you about this evening. You have been probably bombarded with a lot of information over time, but we think now that they've started their lessons and that they've started their activities in Ringwood School, we talk about three really key areas: our curriculum maps and the curriculum that they will study in their time at Ringwood School, how we assess your children and what that means for their future flight paths and their grades when they finish at the end of year 11, and e-safety as they get mobile phones, as they become more used to the online world, how we ensure that they are safe. So I will hand you over to Miss Warnell, who will talk about our curriculum.
Great, thank you. So Mrs. Heaver-Webb said at the beginning that we don't want to kind of overload you with exams and information about that at this stage, which is absolutely true. But what we do provide you with as parents is an overview of everything that the student will be your children, sorry, not students, will be learning for the year ahead. And we call this a curriculum map, and it is broken down, as you can see here, into the units of work that they cover over the year. Now, we give this to the students, they put that into their exercise books, just so they have it as a record. They can use it to rag their work, which means to say whether they feel like they're red, kind of not on where they should be, or they need to improve in that area, or if they're really confident with it, they might colour it green, or they might tick it off. And it's just there as a tool, really, for you to know what your child is learning, for the students to have a really clear picture of their overview of the year. So that is the curriculum map, and I think there's another little star here. Yes, so on there you have knowledge, skills and understanding of, basically it's the curriculum that they will learn over the year, and it's helpful because it shows them what they're learning and when. Thanks. Next slide. The other thing that is really helpful for your children that we provide them in every single subject is a unit sheet, and that is more detailed information of what they will be learning. This allows them, it's just an example here from maths, it allows them to track what they're learning. So for example, they will get their flight path, which Rachel will talk, Miss Heaver-Webb will talk about in a moment. And then it allows them to look, they all look different, the unit sheets, but it allows them to look at them to understand what exactly they're learning, and then to tick off as they've learned it again. It just provides that little bit more information. You may have heard the term knowledge organizer before. It's a bit like that. It provides them with the detailed knowledge of what it is that they are going to be learning. So it's a tool for them really to support their independent learning. You don't need to do anything with these. It's just to show you that they're there, and they are on the website under curriculum and academic. And I think I've got a couple more slides on this. There's two sections that might be of interest if you are looking to support your children. Now, of course, this is for the children. It's not for you. Please don't think we're saying you've got to micromanage every single thing that your child is doing. You really don't. This is about what's helpful for the children. But if you did want to support, there's a how can I revise section in each subject, which gives techniques, maybe useful links, maybe some revision strategies. It's just a bit of further support if you think, you know, if your child's saying, for example, in French, oh, I'm struggling with talking about my school, then underneath that section will say where to go for some support. So it's just a bit of extra if you wanted to support them with that. And the next slide, please. And then we also mentioned supercurricular. Supercurricular is anything beyond what's happening in the classroom related to the topical theme they're learning, but really encourages them to invest themselves and be more curious outside the classroom, to really embrace maybe something more academic, or it might be something more creative, but it's to really help them broaden their mind related to the topics they're learning. And we've put challenge yourself to be a scholar. Rachel will talk about the Scholar Award in a moment, but it really is about embracing the subject. You know, your child might really love a particular subject like maths, for example. So within those supercurricular activities should be something extra if they wanted to do extra extension around that. So that's what is in the curriculum maps. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to talk a little bit about assessment and the information that you should expect to receive this year regarding the progress of your son or your daughter, and also kind of understanding that and knowing whether or not it means that they're on track for doing well a little bit further down the line. So we're going to start off really by going all the way to the end of year 11 and thinking about how we set targets longer term, and then how that translates back into Key Stage 3 and into year 7. So there's a little bit of information on this slide, but hopefully it's fairly straightforward once we've just gone through it. So you will know, especially if you've got older children, that all the GCSEs that they will sit will be graded 9 to 1. And what happens is when students start secondary school, we use normally their Key Stage 2 data, but of course this year and last year that's not been possible due to the pandemic. So we use the CAT test data, and lots of schools do CAT tests, and they are a test of cognitive ability. They don't need any revision. They're very straightforward for students to sit, and they'll be doing those in the next couple of weeks or so. We look at that CAT test data and we use it nationally to feed into a system of targets that looks at how students in the past, like your son or daughter, with the same set of outcomes, the same profile, how they actually went on and performed when they got to year 11. And it uses that information from thousands and thousands of students to suggest to us a target that in the end, in year 11, your child might aim to either achieve or even exceed. And so what we do is we then look at what that target is for the long term, and obviously we're talking nearly 5 years down the line, but we then track back and think about, well, if that's their target for year 11 at the moment, and of course over the long term that can change, if that's their target for year 11, what sort of standard do we want them to be working at or working beyond through year 7, through year 8, through year 9, to make sure that they're going to be on track to at least achieve that target when they start in year 10 and they start their GCSE studies. And that produces what we call a target flight path, which is their target individually for different subjects. They get a different target for each subject, and that's their Key Stage 3 target flight path. Now, this year, like last year, because things are a little bit different, and because we don't have Key Stage 2 data like we would have done up until the COVID pandemic decided to make itself known to us, we also are very careful about reviewing those targets at the end of year 7 to just make absolutely sure that they are the right targets and they are challenging your son or your daughter in the right way to achieve as much as they possibly can, but they're not too onerous, they're not too low. And so we look at what they've actually gone on and produced through year 7, and we use that as well as obviously the teachers' feedback from the lessons they've been in for a whole year to make sure that as they go into year 8, that target flight path is indeed the right one for them. And so this is just a diagram that will show you very briefly what the different target flight paths are for our Key Stage 3 students. And you can see that there are 5 of them, and they align. It's not necessarily the best diagram in the world, but they align, they lead into a set of grades for Key Stage 4. So if, for example, in English, your son or your daughter was given at the moment a target for the end of year 11 that was a grade 5, then we would say, well, in order to be on track to at least meet that grade 5 when they get to year 11, we would like them to be working and aiming at work in the developing flight path. It works, you can see if they had a target of a grade 8, we'd be saying, well, we would be liking to see them working within the mastery flight path. So these flight paths really are a way of us and you and the students themselves, most importantly, being really clear about whether or not they are on track to start year 10 in a way that will set them up really, really effectively and successfully for Key Stage 4 for GCSE. But as I say, they are reviewed to make sure that they are the right targets for each subject and most importantly for the individual child that we have. Now, in terms of what we feed back to parents and what indeed we feed back to students, we provide 2 assessment points each year. So 2 progress checks will come home to your child and to you as a parent or carer. And in that progress check, there'll be 2 different bits of information for each subject that your child studies this year. So you'll first of all, really importantly, get 2 bits of information about their attitude to learning. And obviously in lots of ways, that's a a really important piece of information, at least equally important as what flight path they're working within. Because if they display the right attitude, if they display the right learning behaviours, then of course they're putting themselves in the best possible position to do as well as possible. And so you'll be told one thing about their attitude to learning in the classroom and one thing about their attitude to learning at home with regard to home learning. And Mrs. Warnell is going to talk a little bit more about home learning in a couple of minutes. And we have a sort of set of descriptors of the really good learning behaviours we want to see, both for in the classroom and for home learning. And then for each subject, your child will be given a piece of information from their subject teacher that says whether or not they are always meeting those descriptors, whether or not they're mostly meeting them, whether they're sometimes meeting them, or whether they're rarely meeting them. And so you'll be told that for each subject for both class and home learning. And then again, for each subject, you will be told, and your child will be told, what standard of work they're producing in relation to their target flight path. And I'll talk about when those will come home right at the end. You'll see that at the bottom of the slide, that you will be told that in English their work is above flight path, perhaps in maths their work is also above, maybe in food it's on flight path. If they're one flight path below their targets, then it will say that they are below flight path, and if they were 2 flight paths below their target, then it will say that they are well below target. And in terms of finding out what those targets are, that won't happen just yet because students need to take their CATS test. We need to send that data away. We need to get to know them a little bit as well. But at some point between October half term and Christmas, you and your son or daughter will have those targets shared with you. So you'll know what they are before the first progress check comes home. And Mrs. Warnell said earlier about being a scholar, and so this is also a piece of information that will come through the progress check. Every subject has scholar awards that they can award to students. They are not an award for academic achievement, so they're not an award that's linked to getting the best flight path, achieving the top grade, or any of those things. They are very much an award that's linked to attitude and behaviours in the classroom. And so I won't read through all of these now because they're all on the website and they will be linked in your progress check letter as well. But you can see there that those attributes that we are looking to reward and wanting to foster in your son or your daughter are things like a willingness to question, an interest in being involved in the lesson, a willingness to widen their vocabulary, a real pride in the work that they're completing and the way that they're participating in the class. Okay, so those are the sorts of things that we are really, really keen to reward with a Scholar Award for your child. And I think I've mentioned, but these pieces of information like the descriptors that describe what the developing flight path looks like in science or what it looks like in PE are all available on the website, as Mrs. Warnell said, as are the curriculum maps that she mentioned a few minutes ago. Okay, I'm going to pass back to Mrs. Warnell now.
Thanks. There is just one question. I don't know if you want to respond to it now because it's directly related to the flight paths.
Oh, I haven't seen it, Mrs. Warnell. Would you mind?
Do you streamline these flight paths per class, i.e. how do you make sure one student is following a specific learning target in a whole class?
Okay, so they are not necessarily linked classes because we don't teach in mixed ability groups. We don't teach in set or streamed classes in all our subject areas. It's slightly different in subjects like maths, but having a particular target flight path does not necessarily mean that you will be in a certain class, particularly in mixed ability, which of course our teachers are really used to teaching. So we would expect as a teacher in most of the subject areas that we teach that there will be a range of flight paths. There will be challenging students at all levels and supporting them to achieve their flight paths. But if that leaves you with any further questions, I'm really happy to take them perhaps by email or phone conversation after the meeting, if that's okay, in the school day. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm very sorry, parents, that I forgot to put on the main slide that I am going to talk to you about home learning and Microsoft Teams. So just going to do that now. So we obviously had to introduce Microsoft Teams or something in school for remote learning last year, and we have really embraced Microsoft Teams. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about that. Are we all right to have the slide, please? Next slide. Thanks. So you will have noticed that your child has not had any official homework yet, and we are just getting our students settled, and then we're going to be ready to start off next week with our homework. And this is going to be accessed through Microsoft Teams through the school network. Now, students will have been given their logins, shown how to log on, shown how to access Microsoft Teams in their IT lessons. And what our next step is that they become familiar accessing Teams from home so they can do their home learning, and also in case they need to self-isolate. So just on that, Mr. Massimino will put something in tutor time. He will be getting the tutors to check that the students know how to get onto Teams. If there's any problems, that information will be passed from the tutor to Mr. Massimino, or you can get in touch with us if you've got any problems with that. But just to reassure you that we will be supporting students with that, and actually our students are really good at this, often better than us, because they're so quick at picking things up. But I'll show you in a moment what the homework will look like when it comes up onto Microsoft Teams. It's very easy to follow. But just to let you know that that is on the radar and that is coming, and we know it's something that students worry about, one of the things they worry about with secondary school. But the good thing about Teams is it gives really clear, I mean, it serves like a diary really, in that it gives really clear expectations of when the homework's due, when it's set, and you would be able to look at that if you wanted to. Talk a bit more about that in a moment. Obviously, students need access to a device. It can go on the phone, it can go on tablet, it can be on laptop, even go through the Xbox. And I think there's a help video on how you can do that. But just to say, that third point on there are help videos on our remote learning page. So if you go to the school website, there's just an easy click to student remote learning. And on the website, there's a load of videos. If you are struggling or students are struggling with anything, all of them are on there, and it's just a step-by-step guide of how to kind of get onto Teams, how to access your team, how to find your work. And there is something on their videos 5, 6 and 7 show you how to put the app onto a device. It's just like downloading a normal app onto your device and then logging in. We have a remote learning support tutor. We are very grateful for that. Emily, she is fantastic. So if you need any help with remote learning, Emily will be in touch with you. She will send you out an A4 sheet. Please don't be alarmed by that sheet, because it does say at the top, failure to engage in remote learning means we'll follow up with behaviour sanctions when you get back. That is a document that goes out to all students, because students have to engage with remote learning if they're isolating. Of course, if this is new for year 7, we understand that that might take a little while. So don't panic too much about that, or don't worry about any of it. You can just get in touch with our remote learning support website, link, web address, email address, or email the office, and it'll be passed on to the right person. So please be reassured that we will offer support with that. I think that's everything that I needed to say on that. Thank you. Just so you know what the Teams dashboard looks like, we ask the students when they log on to Teams, and I bet loads of you are familiar with it through work yourselves, but they will have different teams for each of their classes. So we suggest they go into their class team and they make sure they check the posts and they check the assignments, because the homework will be in assignments for them. Next slide, and just to show you what the homework would look like when it arises. So students will have a category. So we have this year, we're trying to really emphasize the value of homework, not overloading the students, but making sure our homework is effective. And we're giving 3 categories, got to remember them. Preparation. So that's like prep work before the lesson. It might be a bit of pre-learning, anything that they're going to use when they come to the lesson or in advance of their learning. Practice is practicing anything related to the learning. So it just could be anything at all so that they improve their learning. It might be some kind of reading exercise if they're practicing certain reading with that, or writing to practice their writing, could be anything. And then revision is a specific learning task related to revising and reviewing the work that they're doing to support them. That could happen at any point over the year. It's not necessarily just before, for example, assessment or exams. So they will have the category, the date it's set, the teacher will be in there, so it's really clear who they're sending their work to, who they're handing their work into, sorry. And then the deadline date is on there as well. So that should be crystal clear. So we shouldn't have any issues with students writing, thinking, oh, I've not recorded my work properly in my diary. It should all be really present. They will click on the homework and it'll be explained for them, and teachers will obviously explain it in class as well. Teachers, just 2 points at the bottom there, the teachers will tell students how work is to be handed in, because you can submit it electronically and upload it, but not all teachers will ask for that. In fact, a lot of people will just say, bring the homework to the next lesson, because they'll be writing it in their books. So it'd be really clear if they've got to hand it in or submit it. And also, students do not have to click hand in. We're not using it as a checking device, unless teachers ask for that, if teachers specifically say because they're submitting it, but really it will be about them showing their homework that it is their next lesson. This is new. We've been using it for a year, but obviously we want to see how this works. We're going to monitor how it's working, and we're going to quality assure it just to check that everything's running as it should be. So do let us know if you have any feedback, and good luck to our students on getting on Teams. Just a couple of other things in terms of online responsibility, which Miss Heaverweb is going to talk about anyway. We do have on the remote learning page some tips for successful online learning, and just to remind our students that it is a learning environment. If you're isolating and you're invited, what will happen is you'll be invited to live lessons. Then it is really being sure that you are taking responsibility and not treating it like a social chat group, which our students don't, but there just needs to be the reminder there that it's a professional kind of learning conversation. There is also that you will be emailed if your child is self-isolating, protocols for live lessons and just about behaviour in live lessons, but all of that will be available on the A4 document that's sent to you if you are in that scenario. Alternatively, it is on the website. And just a quick one to say, well done and thank you for we've got a handful of students that had to isolate, can you believe it, at the beginning of the school year. And we just commend you on having to be resilient and deal with getting online and getting into your lessons when you couldn't come to school. So really well done to those of you that have done that already. If there's any questions, you come back to me or send an email to the office and we'll get back to you. But yeah, good luck with all of that. Thanks. And is there anything else, or is that it? No. Great.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Warnell. Okay, it's sort of a meeting of two halves, because really we are seizing an opportunity with this second half of the meeting to introduce and raise the profile straight away of the importance to us here of e-safety and keeping your children safe, particularly now that they are getting to year 7 and perhaps they're getting phones, maybe smartphones for the first time, and a whole world both of opportunity but also of things to be aware of and to be mindful of and to work with keeping them safe is sort of opening up for our children who are this age, aren't they? And obviously here in school we are all trained annually and up-to-date safeguarding information, but this is really about making sure that as parents and all of us who are hosting the meeting tonight are also parents, that we feel as equipped as possible to manage what can sometimes feel like a bit of a daunting landscape of new technology that perhaps we're not always as au fait as our children in, and that's putting it mildly. So really this is about flagging some areas to think about and also really underlining the importance of talking with your child and making sure that that dialogue is open and that they feel that they can raise anything that might be concerning them. So we're going to start off by thinking about apps, and that's probably because, again, once they get their smartphones, particularly, apps can suddenly appear and take up an awful lot of their time. And as parents, it can feel like there's an awful lot of apps that do an awful lot of different things, but actually, apps really only have a fairly limited number of functions, and it's just about being aware of these functions, and you can see the 4 main functions on the screen, and we're just going to go through these 4 functions and flag perhaps what the most important things to ask of your child are to make sure that they are keeping themselves safe and that you're able to do that as well. And you might see in the corner that this is from a website that will actually flag at the end that's got some really helpful resources directly aimed at parents and protecting our children. Okay, so we're going to start off with thinking about the viewing elements of an app, which might of course sometimes be the only thing your child does, particularly when they start using an app. And there are loads of opportunities, things that they can see, information, support, some fantastic things out there, but also apps are, and the internet is, a public and open space, and we have to be aware, don't we, as parents, that anybody can post information, anybody can share content with our children who might be looking at things on apps. And sometimes that content can be inappropriate, can be sexual images or violent images, and we need to make sure that as much as possible we are protecting them and aware of what they might be seeing. You will know, I'm sure, that lots of apps, but not all of them, have privacy settings and parental controls. So obviously the first thing that we would say is just familiarise yourselves and make sure that you have got all those privacy settings, your child has got those privacy settings set up so that their account is private, the location trackers are off, all those sorts of things. And that you have got the parental controls activated to whatever degree you feel is important. But the most important thing is really that open dialogue. So in terms of thinking about what your child might be seeing via apps, to be talking to them about what content they are seeing and asking them questions like whether or not it's age appropriate. And making sure that you're asking yourself the question about what filters are available on that app and what do you want to actually set up in terms of parental controls to control and to gatekeep what they might be viewing. So the next function of the app that your son or your daughter may or may not choose to use is that they might not just be viewing images via the app, but they might also be deciding to share pictures and images, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. It can be really fun, really creative, it can help our young people to express themselves, and of course it's really easy to share. And that in itself can be one of the issues, can't it? That perhaps we might ourselves have had the experience that we might share online something that we would never share in real life. Because it's harder, but also because sometimes it feels a little bit more protected, quite wrongly of course, and therefore it seems easier to perhaps quickly share something that we would never dream of doing online. And of course, with children, particularly as they get older, it's really important that we are exploring the motivations behind what they're sharing and whether or not they're choosing to share something, and making sure that we're talking to them about those motivations to make sure that they're not feeling pressurized into sharing something, or they're uncomfortable about sharing something, or even perhaps they're being persuaded or blackmailed into sharing something. So again, when it comes to thinking about this element of apps, just to be asking your son or your daughter what it is they're sharing, and also really importantly, of course, who are they sharing it with, who can see it. Because they may not be aware of who could see it, and of course it may be that they're sharing it with one person, but that person may go on and share it with somebody else. And then the final two functions really we've put together in terms of chatting with other users and also friending other users. And again, it can be a really phenomenal resource for our young people and a way genuinely of making friends and making connections and finding like-minded people in online communities and support. But of course, it can also open up opportunities for adults to contact our young people online in a way that would never have happened prior to the invention of apps and social media and the mobile technologies that our young people mostly have access to now. So again, just talking to your son and your daughter about who is it that they are in contact with? How do they know those people? What do they know about them? Because of course, many people will be absolutely genuine, but others may put pressure on our young people, may be looking to manipulate our young people. And it's really important that we open up that dialogue about who are they following, who are they friending, who are those people? And to be aware of the fact that sometimes our young people may be quite embarrassed to talk about this, because first of all, they may think, and we've all heard this, that you don't understand their online life, you didn't experience it as a child yourself, so you just don't get get it why they might be friending certain people who we as parents might instinctively feel like, well, you don't know that person. But equally, they may feel responsible for friending somebody, perhaps if they initiated that contact in the first place. And so they may not wish to share that. And again, really important that we allow that no blame dialogue so that they can say if they've friended somebody who actually perhaps now they're not so comfortable with, or they're a little bit concerned about. So again, the key questions here really are asking them, who are they friending and what are they sharing with those people? So the functions of the app, of course, all sort of mold together, don't they? So that they can then be sharing things with those people that they've friended. So just thinking then all together with regard to apps, to be really thinking and perhaps having a conversation with your son or your daughter tonight or at the weekend about these 4 areas, and thinking about what are they actually looking at, what are they viewing when they are on Instagram perhaps, or maybe they're on Twitter, or they're on any kind of app at all. What is it that they're sharing with anyone else on that app? What are they sharing, and what are their motivations for doing that? And then who can they talk to, and how are they talking to those people, and where are they talking to those people? And then finally, who are they friends with, and why are they friends with those people? And just opening up those dialogues on all fronts with regards to apps, so that we really do feel as parents that we know what they're using those apps to do, and that what they're using those apps to do is entirely comfortable and safe for our young people. Okay, so one of the elements that we just touched on there was sharing images, and obviously this is one of the things that is increasing in society. And on the next slide, I'll just share a couple of statistics with you from recent research, which just show how widespread it is. Even if we might think that this wouldn't be my son, this wouldn't be my daughter, actually it might be. And it's really important that we're aware of it, and that we're ready to listen to our children, and we're ready to talk about these kinds of issues. Young people may share naked or semi-naked images of themselves. They may call them nudes, they may call them pics, and they may do that for a real variety of reasons. And some of those reasons are on the slide that you can see. And you can also see that some of those reasons are more or less risky than others. So it may be that, particularly as they're older, that they're sharing these things as part of a committed and trusting relationship. It may be, of course, that it's to do with peer pressure to fit in with friends that might be doing the same thing, or that they might think are doing the same thing. It might be that they're looking for reassurance about body image, so they're sharing something to ask people's opinion of something, or they might be doing it because it's the funny thing to do, it's the humorous thing to do within a peer group, or of course they might be doing it because they are pressured into doing so by another person. And just to share some up-to-date statistics with you, that it could be our child, and we need to be, as we are as staff at Ringwood, prepared to think it could happen, and we need to be prepared to help support students who do this. That some of the most recent figures there you can see that according to Internet Watch, there are 68,000 cases of self-generated images, and perhaps more pertinently, that was a rise of 77% on the same information in 2019. And that going back another couple of years, but this comes from Ofsted, who did a big piece of work on abuse within our young people, that 26% of young people said that they had sent a nude image of themselves to somebody that they were interested in. But more recent data suggests that those numbers are increasing. And that, of course, includes incidents where they are groomed to do so by adults. So that's thinking about that last bullet point on the last slide about feeling pressurized or manipulated into doing so. So one of perhaps the most risky contexts of all. So it may not be your child, but of course you can see from those statistics that it could be any of our children. And so we need to be really aware of what's actually happening and not be ostrich-like, and we'll talk about that a bit later on, but be really aware of what could happen and what to do about it. And so again, the most important thing is again about talking to your son or your daughter about sharing images, and doing that in a way that will keep that dialogue open, will mean that they do come to you, to another trusted adult, if something does happen that they would like to talk about. So to avoid reacting in a way that would be perhaps judgmental, which of course is perhaps the most human reaction sometimes, isn't it? If we do react in a judgmental way, perhaps it will mean that our children will be less likely to share something with us in future, and to try and think about doing it in a way that's perhaps less personal. So sometimes we all know that there are stories in the press about celebrities who have shared images. Even referring to something like that and using that as a way in with your son or your daughter might be a really useful way of opening up this conversation. Sometimes young people genuinely don't think that when they share an image with somebody else, with a trusted somebody else, that it won't go any further. And of course, we know that that isn't the case at times. And of course, sometimes they share an image with one person and many more people end up seeing them. But also doing this in the context of discussing what a healthy relationship looks like and really important issues of trust and consent, but reminding them the most important point that nobody should be pressurizing them into sharing an image of themselves if they don't want to. And that's the most important thing, and that if they are being pressurized, that it is okay to tell someone what's happening or possibly what they've already done, that it's really important that they tell someone about that. Okay, we're going to move on a little bit away from apps and away from images, and just think about some of the other aspects of online safety that as our children are growing up, that we need to be as aware of as possible, so that we can keep our children safe and protect them from anything that may be negative or harmful to them. So we're just going to talk briefly about gaming. You may well have a child. A few years ago, I think we all lost our children to Fortnite for hours on end. I think sometimes we still do, but there are also lots of other really popular games out there, things like Call of Duty, things like FIFA, things that they can play perhaps any time against anyone, that they can communicate with other people via those games. And of course, just to say that it's not always only games that can be played on consoles like Xboxes, that actually some games, like things like Rocket League, can be played via things like Windows. You don't have to have an Xbox or a Nintendo to game. And so as parents, not to sit back and think, well, my child doesn't have any of those consoles, so they won't be gaming. They could, of course, be gaming. And to most importantly, perhaps, and most straightforwardly, to be aware of the fact that as parents, one of the things we can do is monitor and limit gaming by being really aware of the PEGI age limits on gaming, that they are there not just actually to indicate something about the nature of the game and the content of the game, but they're also there to indicate things about the typical age of the other players of that game, and also something that perhaps we might not know unless we really do know about gaming. They're also there to indicate something about the nature of the chat that your son or your daughter can be part of via that game or through that console. Now, those age ranges of 12, 16 and 18 that are on games, they are actually legally enforceable, and they should not be supplied to anyone under that age. So that's one thing just to be really aware of with gaming, that those age limits are enforceable by law, and so they do give a really good indication of whether or not the game that your child is asking you if they can play is actually suitable. But really do remember about that chat feature in the game as well. It's not just the game itself that they're playing. Okay, so just moving over from specific technologies then, and thinking about some of the other reasons, as well as things like who children might come across when they're online, but thinking about the other reasons that it's really important that we are absolutely on top of our children and technology and how they're using technology. And one of the areas that I'm sure will perhaps be a bugbear with your son or your daughter as they go into the teenage years is sleep, and whether or not they need the sleep that we think they need. So the research suggests at the moment, the most up-to-date research suggests that most teenagers need between 7 and 9 hours of sleep. So just take a minute to think about whether or not your son or your daughter is getting that. I imagine the last week or so they were probably pretty tired when they came home from school every day and pretty tired when they got home on Friday. And actually, as we probably know, the more time a child or a person spends in front of a screen, the more the blue light emitters potentially affect the health of that young person, the health, in fact, of us all. And there are particular areas that it is thought now that blue light emitters can impact. So I'm just going to read you some. So we think, the research thinks that sleep and not having enough sleep, which of course can be impacted by looking at screens, supports processes in the brain that are particularly important for learning and memory and emotions. And as parents, we certainly know that lack of sleep equates to grumpiness, but as teachers, we know that lack of sleep can really equate to a lack of ability to do well in the classroom. Also, there's a link between a lack of sleep and aggression, impulsivity and short-temperedness. And again, we might know some of those things as parents sometimes, but also that a lack of sleep can hinder our children's ability to handle stress and strain. And obviously starting a new school is a stressful situation at times. Really important that they are in the best position possible to manage and deal with all these new experiences that they're having hour after hour at the moment, and will continue obviously to have for the next few weeks in terms of newness. And it can, that lack of sleep, lead to an increased risk of stress and anxiety and depression. It can lead to an increased risk of physical injuries because, of course, our coordination can be impaired by our lack of sleep. We may well have experienced that as adults. And also, interestingly, it's thought now that it's linked to an increased risk of obesity because it alters the hormones that regulate our appetite. So there is a whole raft, isn't there, of reasons why sleep is fundamental to the all-round health of our children. And just to go back to think about the fact that those blue light emitters from our mobile phone screens particularly can really impinge on our ability to go to sleep. I did a little bit of extra research about that, and there is a very salutary number of children, I think it's 29% of children who have their phone with them at night, who say that they actually check it for something other than the time in the middle of the night. So that's a pretty high statistic of children who are perhaps looking at their phones in the middle of the night, not even just in the evenings as they go to bed. But we will pick up on that a little bit more in a few minutes.
Stevie Webb, can I jump in there a second?
Yeah, of course.
Because I'm super nosy, I was talking to the students about, they were discussing about when they need a PE kit or thing on the group chat. I said, oh, really, you've got a year 6 group chat from your junior school? I said, what kind of times are people messaging? They're like, oh, all late at night, early morning. So it might not be your child who is sending those messages, but they might well be receiving them. So as best as possible, they might hate me for this. At this age now, I would try and avoid phones being in the bedroom at all because of the things you've already said, the distractions, the potential that there is something connected to the world sat right next to their bed, and other children might be waking them up and messaging them. So if we all agree as Team Year 7 and Team Ringwood, make it Mr. Massimino's fault that we keep these phones out of bedrooms while they sleep, I think it's going to help us all.
Thank you, Mr. Massimino. And I will just share another rather amazing statistic with you, that out of teenagers, and this was in 2019, 29% of teenagers said that they actually kept their mobile phone in their beds. So not just in their bedroom, but they had their mobile phone in their beds, perhaps on their pillows. And that idea of the phone lighting up, as Mr. Massimino said, not necessarily anything they're doing, but someone else sending a message through and the phone lighting up. And it's literally, you know, a few inches away from their faces, is perhaps something that as parents we don't really realise that might be happening. So absolutely worth thinking about instigating that rule of no phones in the bedroom. We'll come on to that in a minute as well. I just wanted to flag again more generally, you just talked about sleep, but thinking about mental health, and you might have seen this morning actually the BBC are reporting on a study, a news story that's come out of Facebook, because Facebook has done its own internal research into social media and its effect on teenagers, and they weren't revealing that research, it's been leaked. but they were looking particularly at Instagram, which of course is a very popular app for our young people to belong to and be part of. And the research found that there were increased levels of anxiety and depression amongst teenagers who were on Instagram for a long period of time, as well as body image concerns. And that's just one story that's come out today. So probably if we'd have done this evening next week, we could have referred to something else. So it's in the news, isn't it, all the time. But thinking about the impact on our young people's mental health and how much we're perhaps gatekeeping, how much and for how much time, and what it is that they're actually looking at and going on. And on a slightly different note, but something really to start talking to our young people about now, is that everything that they're doing online is leaving a digital footprint that they are making. And of course, that's their online identity. And it's something that is unique to them, but it is something that also conveys an impression of them to other people. And the thing that for them to understand is that anything that they post, that they share, that they are part of online, that could become part of their digital footprint, those things that perhaps might seem momentary and fleeting are actually potentially there forever, that what goes on the internet stays on the internet potentially. So to really talk to your son or your daughter about being aware of that longevity of what they are posting or involved with online, and how it's forming an impression that perhaps in the future is something that they wouldn't want. And again, we could all refer to, couldn't we, stories of people in the public eye who have lost their position, who have had to step down from things because of posts that they put on Twitter 8 years ago, or something that they put on Facebook a long time ago. So perhaps to use those opportunities to flag these kind of issues with your children and have these conversations with them. Okay, so perhaps to set the ground rules early is the most important thing. So if your child has not long had a mobile phone or is getting a mobile phone this year, perhaps getting a smartphone, to really think about how you can establish the ground rules now. Because of course, as we all know, if we've got older children, once routine is entrenched, it's really hard to go back and change those parameters, change those ground rules. So as Mr. Massimino has already suggested about keeping phones out the bedroom, we would also advocate as a school a kind of powered down hour before bedtime for all, in capital letters, the family. Because of course, as adults, sometimes we are the worst at sort of doing what I say, but not necessarily what I do, and telling our children to come off their mobile devices, as we are sometimes a bit too glued to our mobile devices. So thinking about having a power down hour for everybody, thinking about perhaps everybody charging their phones overnight in a communal area, leaving their phones on the stairs so that they are not in bedrooms, so that we can make sure that they are away from our children whilst they're getting that quality sleep, that they're not going to see anything just before they go to sleep or overnight that might upset them, might unnerve them, whether that is something that would be very concerning, like an image that we talked about earlier, or whether it is, like Mr. Massimino said, a message, a well-meaning message from a friend that just makes them worry and think, oh gosh, I didn't know I had that tomorrow, or I'm not sure where my PKit is, I'm going to get out of bed now and find it. And all those sorts of things that can really interrupt our children's sleep patterns for them. So thinking about trying to ensure that your teenager is not secretive, they're not hiding away with their mobile phone, that using mobile devices and mobile technologies is an open thing within our households, so that there is a feeling that people aren't hiding what they're looking at or hiding what they are seeing. Okay, one thing we do quite often get told by children is, well, I need my phone because I need it to wake me up. I use it as an alarm clock. And to that, we would just say something very simple, which is please buy an alarm clock and ask your child to use an alarm clock to use as an alarm clock. And then they don't need their phones, and they really don't need their phones in their rooms at night. Apparently, parents are actually the worst offenders here, that 74% of parents have their own phones within reach in the bedroom. So again, very much a chance to reevaluate our own behaviours, as well as thinking about what we're going to require and set as the ground rules for our children. So overall then, just before we move on, just at the end of the meeting, thinking about some helpful websites. If any of this has raised any questions or concerns for you and you would like to find out more, overall, just don't be an ostrich. Talk as much as you can, have that open dialogue about being online to your child, so that you can talk with them about staying safe, talking with them about worries that you might have, worries that they might have, and so that they know that they can tell you, and they can tell us in school, of course, anything that worries them, who their trusted adults are within school, as they get to know their teachers, they get to know who the safeguarding team are, to make sure that they know who they can go to. They can go to their tutors, of course, to Mr. Massimino as their head of year, to us, of course, as well. And to direct your children to age appropriate information. And so some of these websites may well be very, very useful. Some of the slides we've shown tonight are from the Think You Know website. This is actually put together by CEOP. And CEOP's role is part of the National Crime Agency. CEOP's role is to tackle the sexual abuse and exploitation of children, both online and offline, actually. So you may find more wide information there that's useful to you, but to protect our children from sexual abuse and exploitation. So lots of really good resources on that Think You Know website, particularly if you go to the parent section, you'll find an awful lot of useful things, videos, animations, as well as written resources. Other organisations which of course can support, Childline, you will of course, I'm sure have heard of that, it's been around for a long time, hasn't it? But it is a organisation with a 24-hour helpline with an adult that they can talk to, run by the NSPCC now, where they can speak to a trained counsellor, or they can speak online about anything that they're worried about. The Mix is an organisation that does some similar things to that, but it goes up to the age of 25, whereas Childline is up to the age of 19. And it also has, Childline, sorry, I should have said, also has a section called the Report and Remove section that you can use with your children. If they have put anything online, they can report a nude image of themselves or somebody else that might have been shared, and they can get it removed. And so that's a really important resource to know about, just in case it should ever become relevant or useful to you and your children. There is, of course, many resources, phone lines, other places to go on our own school website, on the safeguarding section of our website. If you go onto our website, you'll see it flagged in red in the top right-hand corner. And if you click on that link, you will see information about who our safeguarding leads are at school, about other phone numbers, other websites that you can go to, and how you can get in touch with us if there is anything that you need to let us know regarding safeguarding. So that is there on the Ringwood School front page of our website. So please do have a look at that so you can familiarise yourself with what's there. And then on a final note, thank you very much for sticking with us with all of that, an awful lot of information. Just to let you know that tomorrow we will send you information, as I said right at the beginning when people were coming into the meeting, about how to find this video on our YouTube channel. If you didn't watch all of it, or you have any technological problems, or someone else asks you want to see it again. And the communication we send home tomorrow will have a little bit of information about our English curriculum and our maths curriculum to help you support your child in those two key, ever so sorry about that typo, areas. So look out for that communication tomorrow. Now, I know that Mr. Massimino and I think probably Mrs. Warnell have been keeping across the chat and the questions that might have come in on the chat. So I wonder if I can just briefly pass over to either Mr. Massimino or Mrs. Warnell, just to address anything that might not have been addressed already that is most appropriately addressed here, or to say any final comments before we say goodbye.
Thank you, Mrs. Heaver-Webb. I'm pretty sure, Mr. Massimino, that we've answered all the questions. Would you agree with that, if you wouldn't mind just checking through them? I think so,
yeah, lots of questions in there, lots of those answered, lots of parents sharing ideas, which is great. We aren't the oracles, we don't know it all. It's only because we've seen it. We might not be the world's greatest parents, we do try our best, but it's only because we work with children have seen it so many times. I've been head of year 7, head of year 11, and it's why my daughter's never taken her iPad up into a room, because some of the roughest conversations I've had is where a young lady's shared a photo and it's gone around the school, everyone's seen it, and I've got a mum in tears, a daughter in tears. It breaks my heart. So that's why we lay it on quite thick at this point, and we want to work with you and help you. And if you want to help draw up a contract with your child about safe social media use, phone use, I think I've got one tucked away somewhere about that maturity and that sharing. That's really important. But I think we've got all the questions, and thank you for your time this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, Mrs. Warnell.
So I was just going to say on the back of that, I think also what Mrs. Heaver-Webb was saying as well, and what Mr. Massimino said, is about having that conversation together and almost letting the children talk to you about what they think is appropriate. Obviously, you know what is appropriate in terms of the expectations for the phone in the room, for example, and just coming to that agreement of that it's for really for the best for them. And so it feels like it's a joint, like you said, Mr. Massimino, like a contract and an agreement together to move forward. It is really, really handy to be able to do that. And thanks to the recommendations about Alexa as well. Your child will definitely say to you when you come off this call, but I need it for my alarm. That is the guaranteed standard answer. And I do get that because they do use it for an alarm, but it is worth really considering what your other options are for that. So thanks for those suggestions on there. And thank you for this evening. Sorry, Rachel.
No, thank you very much. Well, thank you so much for your time. We hope that it was a useful meeting, but of course, if it's raised any further questions for you, then don't hesitate to get in touch with us tomorrow. And we look forward to seeing you again. I'm just going to press stop